So before I pass it over to you, Dominique, I just want to note we put this in our email for registrants, but we are asking that any white folks, so if you look somewhat like me in some way, shape, or form, we are asking that you provide a goodwill donation to the organization and or to our participants, Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, Cash App, we love you, use Cash App, and pay our Black folks for their labor. So please make a donation. Over to you, Dominique.
Thank you. I am currently struggling to try to share the video on Facebook, but we're gonna make this work. I am, you know what? I'll trust you all to share it. My name is Dominique Morgan. I am the executive director of Black in Pink, and we really didn't want to close out what folks call Pride Month without talking about the ways that Black queer folks are essential to the work and the process, and the ways that we really need to name and then address and then dismantle the barriers to Black queer folks in leadership in the work, and not just leadership in name only, but leadership in pay, leadership in space to engage in their own autonomy and power, leadership to decide what does it mean for them to engage in their autonomy and power. And we had a wonderful session about 2 weeks ago where we dug into this, and so we were excited to share with you all again. I have, for those who know me and those who, y'all may not, I am, the PowerPoints is a space of real shenanigans for me. But however, thanks to Canva, I'm actually decent, kinda. So I wanted to give y'all a little razzle dazzle. See, I hope some of my board members are on here. This is why y'all pay me the big bucks, because, I can drop and click really pretty things. Dusty,
okay, razzle dazzle.
Dusty, don't be envious. Dusty, I'm not coming for your job, I promise. Dusty Ginner is our director of communications and grants. Dusty is incredible. So I'm here today with two of my favorite people, and so we're gonna have some conversations. We're gonna save some time at the end for questions, so please put questions in the chat box, because I think it's hard for us to really do this work and folks not ask the questions that they're having that are possibly preventing them from leaning into the work. There's so many fears around change, whether the change is positive for one group or another, there's valid fear there. So this is a great opportunity for us to unpack that with this group of folks that are in a position to really fill those questions. And I think we're gonna come out of this feeling dope. So a 2020 vision is a time to see us. I'm joined by Pastor Dale Brown and Tommy Young Dennis. And so we are going to just do some introductions of everyone. You'll see their bios on the screen, and then they'll kind of get into some tea. So first up is Tommy.
Hi, everybody. So Tommy Young Dennis, y'all see my title as of now for the Nebraska AIDS Project. I'm a prevention and outreach specialist specializing in outreach to Black, gay, and bisexual men. In addition to that, I also identify as someone who is living with HIV. I have been a longstanding advocate for 10 years, living with HIV for 10 years. In addition to that, I am the co-chair of the HIV subgroup that's currently housed by Black in Pink. I think that's it. Native Omahan, born and raised. Yeah, y'all find out more about me like throughout this presentation, I'm sure, but I don't want to take up too much time, but that's me.
Tommy is so doggone humble. They should be taking a break. But it's cute. It's cute. I'm gonna let you hoop. For the non-white folks, for the folks who are system impacted, folks of color on this call, listen, let me tell you something. If you wait for these people to give you your roses, honey, you'll be sitting there with some dead daisies. Did you hear what I said? So you have to really speak your greatness. But and Tommy is an innovator. There was no face of the experience of HIV and AIDS from the perspective of Black folks in Nebraska before Tommy. And Tommy was unselfish with his time and his story, and opening up his lived experience, and including Tommy's husband and family overall. In a city like Omaha, which I'm born and raised here in Omaha, but our kind of joke about Omaha is that if it hits New York, it'll hit us like 3 years later. So much about PrEP and all the very ways that we're talking about HIV and AIDS in a very comfortable way in many cities. We're still getting there here in our city. So for Tommy to have done this work for almost a decade, Tommy is the truth. So that's that there. On to someone else who I idolize, and I spend a good amount of most Sunday mornings I'm in my bed screaming his name because he's preaching online and giving a word. Y'all give it up for Pastor Darrell Brown. Darrell, tell the folks who you are, what's going on.
So thank you for that clarification, just in case anyone was misconstruing that. Thank you. So I'm Pastor Darrell Brown Jr., founding senior pastor of Kingdom Builders Christian Center here in Omaha, Nebraska. We're 11 years old, and also an adolescent health educator at Charles Drew Health Center. My work is kind of at the intersection of spirituality and healing, Black advocacy, and LGBTQIA+ advocacy as well. And so my day-to-day work is I provide sexual health education to ages 15 to 24-year-olds primarily. Also an author, published author of a book where I do tell my story as well. Like Tommy, I too am living with HIV as well. And in my book, I'm Positive I Forgive You, How I Forgave the Man That Gave Me HIV. I shared that story of both my diagnosis, how I navigated the diagnosis, and how I arrived at a place of forgiveness towards the individual that transmitted the virus to me. And so that's just a little bit of my work.
Just a little bit. Darrell is, listen, we are excited that we've launched a housing initiative and a community initiative in Omaha called Leiden House, named after Black and Pink's founder, Jason Leiden. And Leiden House, I don't know what we're gonna call it, like a Leiden House Original, whatever. We've launched that, and we have some family members. We call our Black and Pink, we are family. We've had 2 family members move in thus far, and we've got space for 1 more, and we'll be at capacity by the end of July. But with Pastor Brown and Kingdom Builders Christian Center, we are working on building Leiden House Walnut Hill, which will specifically look at the intersections of LGBTQ+ youth who are navigating the experience of living with HIV and AIDS that fall in those adolescent spaces where you're 18 and 19 and the world is telling you you're old enough to make it, but you haven't had enough experience. You don't even have credit to get an apartment if you want to. And the system has most likely been beating you up and oppressing you for most of your life. We want to create a space where young folks can really thrive, and we're doing it in partnership with Kingdom Builders. So that's so exciting. I always try to put these session overviews together for the Virgos who are on the live streams, because I just go willy-nilly, but I really wanted this kind of holds me accountable and lets folks know like what we're gonna cover. We're gonna talk about like liberation practices. So each of us, this theme came from Darrell Tommy and I all had been folks who were receiving services from multiple organizations in our community at one time. My personal story of being formerly incarcerated. I came home. I was released from prison after almost a decade with a $100 check, and boots and prison jeans and a thermal button-up shirt and a t-shirt. And I had my songs in a bag, and I think I had some deodorant and some soap, because I was like, you know, something could happen, right? And luckily there were multiple community-based entities that really were there for me. And through that, I started to get into community work and advocacy. And then there was a time when like the folks who used to offer me services, we were kind of colleagues. And when I say colleagues, like we were equitable in access and our title and our situation. And then when I was positioned as executive director of Black in Pink, of this national agency, and I moved our offices from Boston to Omaha, there was a huge shift of people who I used to at one time need for rental assistance. They, you know, I'm now offering funds for their clients in their agency, right? And there was something really awesome about that, because I was able to realize the idea that it doesn't matter where your story starts, you get to decide where your story ends. And then I'm blessed to be with Tommy and Daryl, where we had that similar thing of, we came from really needing these systems for our survival. And luckily we were able to get the things that positioned us to stabilize. And then now we're in a space where we're thriving. And so we're trying to talk about, and we want to do the work to dismantle the luck. We want to remove the factor of luck. The favor piece, like it's awesome to have favor, but Pastor, they say favor ain't fair, right? Mm-hmm. And in fairness and in equity, we're saying if people want it, they should be able to have it. So we're going to talk about your liberation practices in your agency. Are you really ready to be unnecessary? Are we doing the work to make sure to eradicate our need in the process of the work? Are we doing the work to where it's maintained at a status quo? We maybe aren't doing the work to where there's additional harm caused, but we're just trying to maintain it where it's at. Are you doing the work to no longer be needed? Whose voices are being heard in your agency, and how are they being heard? And who gets to decide if folks are really being heard? And then we're gonna have time for reflections and questions. So, liberation practices. Liberation is really an individual. I've learned through this work that so many definitions that I thought were universal are really individualized. So large groups of folks will come together and coalesce around a certain definition that becomes then the mainstream definition. But historically, the folks who haven't had access to whatever the word is discussing, they have their own definition of it. And they're in search of it in the ways they best know how. And I wrote this down earlier because y'all, I am a person that lives with ADHD. And there's something really special when my ADHD meds kick in. I'm like superhuman. It's like y'all might be too young to remember the Bionic, the $1 Million Man. It feels like that. And I really was this idea that when we talk about liberation, like, so with Independence Day coming up, like independence is liberation, and liberation is freedom without chains. And it means that without the roots of harm, of white supremacy and historical trauma, folks are positioned to have access to the things that are owed to them. Because many of the things we're talking about today, you're not doing anyone a favor. These are the things that are owed unto them simply because of who they are and the position they're in. So universally, that's kind of how we talking about it. And I'm kind of talking from my friends, but we are all really close. And I know we talk, like we have these conversations, and this is very free, y'all. It's like y'all sitting in our living room with us. But in a matter of 10 minutes, we can go from Beyonce's newest song to talking about abolition, to talk about to talking about chattel slavery, to then talking about these shoes that we saw. So we talk about these things a lot in 10 minutes. So yeah, make sure you strap yourself in when you're with us. So that's kind of like when we talk about liberation, what we're discussing. But these questions that I would love Tommy and Daryl to give their perspective on are, what does liberation look like in collaborative spaces? So if we're saying, one, that at the end of the day, the definition of liberation, and most definitely, most people approach getting access to liberation as a singular experience, right? When in the definition space, we can sometimes look up and a multitude of folks will, again, coalesce around a shared definition, and that feels good. But how do you get people around a shared definition and engaging in a shared process to access said liberation? So what does that look like? And what are known and unknown barriers for system impacted people? And this is a kind of a question for y'all to kind of process yourself. Grab some pen, grab some paper, take some notes. I know there's going to be a video, but I'm a person that kind of has to write and process while I go. But for Tommy and Daryl, what are some barriers in agencies you've seen? And if you don't want to talk about your own agency, we all know enough folks. Because the other thing is that when we talk about system impacted, we use system impacted because it creates a larger center. So not just people who are formerly and currently incarcerated, we're talking about folks who've been impacted by systems of oppression. And we know folks who have a PhD who are working in some of the most expensive universities in the country who are still navigating barriers every day for their excellence to be validated. So Tommy and Daryl, whatever y'all want to pull at, go into it.
I think the first thing that when you talk about your practices and when you're talking about collaborative spaces, I think that it is super important to look through a larger lens, right? I think that when we do our work, we look through the specific lens in which we do our work. And everybody speaks a different language, right? We're all speaking a different language. And although we may have the same larger goal, on a more micro level, we all are looking at different goals. We're all looking at different things. From the healthcare perspective, we're trying to get folks well and healthy as far as their physical health in many instances, their mental health. When we're talking about HIV work, we're more specifically talking about specifically HIV, but not always understanding that all of these things overlap, all of these things intersect, and that we've got to look at it through a larger lens when we're talking about liberation, because if we pigeonhole ourselves into only looking at it through the lens of our agency or only looking at it through the lens of said individual that we're focusing on, we're going to miss the larger picture. So when we're talking about collaboration, we've got to look through a larger lens and say, okay, what first of all is language that we can use that encompasses the fullness of what we're talking about here so that nobody is left out of the conversation. When we're talking about collaboration, we also have to look at the idea that liberation doesn't mean that I have to agree with your idea of liberation for yourself and what you have defined that for. Because again, we may be trying to access something totally different on an individual level. But when we're talking about something collaborative, we've got to look at that larger lens and look at what is the overall goal and how can we accomplish that in our individual ways? What can we bring to the table to do that without showing bias towards our definition or our lane of liberation?
I was going to say, so like you literally took everything out of my mouth, Daryl. So thank you for that. But like when I think back to like my own like liberation and collaborative spaces, like I think back to I can only like pull from my own lived experience, right? So I think about like what does it look like for me to infiltrate these systems? What does it look like for me to come into these spaces and make not only change, but like effective change? Because you can come in and seemingly have your voice heard, or state whatever reason or purpose that you're there, but you can't do that effectively if you're not put at the forefront, if you will, as a leader. And so to me, that's been kind of my experience with just trying to navigate different spaces, especially traditionally white spaces, as a Black gay man who is living with HIV, really just trying to come into those spaces and really set myself up as one of the thought leaders, for my agency.
Because wouldn't you agree that everybody seems to have the answer for what is going to best serve us, except for instead of asking us what's going to best serve us, we're subjugated to what everyone else has, what ideas everyone else has concerning our liberation, as opposed to allowing us to have that open and honest dialogue about what liberation looks like and feels like for us that are the most impacted in the work.
And
Absolutely.
Daryl, that is so, the lack of trust that we have for people who have been system impacted to know the answer to their needs is scary.
Mm-hmm.
This perception that it's not, we don't want to acknowledge that they just can't go up and get it. It's that they just don't know how. You know what I'm saying? Like, do you think if I had the funds to go to grocery shopping, I would have went and got a pantry? Do you think if I would have had the funds and access to the funds to pay my rent or my lights and water at one time, I would have sought those? Like, there's this idea that people want to be dependent on systems, and that's not the truth. I believe that people have an inherent need to be free. That's why anytime you try to tie people down, their physical reaction to get to freedom, it happens because it's not meant to be the case. And whether you think it's, oh, these people want this, these people want that, baby, $400 or $500 from these systems of oppression. One, let's acknowledge how they got the money in the first place. But has no comparison to what it feels like to really sit in your own independence and then go to that space. What I think we've been able to see, and we really are, the three of us, along with our friend group, we really sit in a privileged space. I don't think we don't talk about how privileged we are enough. We're lucky enough to where we have a group of folks who we are every day working to get access to liberation together. And when one of us gets a piece of it and another one needs it more, we gonna break it in half, or we're gonna break it in threes. And that's rare, right? Because there's a lot of decentering yourself that needs to happen. And so many people are afraid to decenter and not be necessary to the process. Baby, who was talking? Oh goodness. I'm trying to think of, I was talking to them, I was somewhere, and I was so flabbergasted that I was talking to them, and I was so emotional about it. But essentially what the person said to me was, if they get to liberation while you're on vacation, baby, you still get liberation too. I wish I could really, I don't like hearing something like that and not being able to say who said it, and it's gonna come back to me. But when they said it, I said, ooh, that shook me, because in this work, so there's two ways that we feel like we have to be necessary. Either we feel like we're the only ones to do the work, no one else will do it if we don't show up. So we push our bodies and minds and our spirits to the brink, trying to be present. And I think all of us can kind of empathize, and that resonates with us. Or, so there's like the martyr experience of, I'm necessary, I'm gonna put myself on the line, nobody else will. And then the flip side of it is, well, honey, this can't happen without me. And if it happens without me, what does it mean for me? Because so many people stay a part of agencies or stay a part of movements to where their identities become those things.
Can I add one more to that, Dom?
Yes, please.
Can I add one more to that? One more piece, I think, is the protective nature as well. There are some things, there's a protective nature that motivates. It's not just the martyrdom. It's also not just the, oh my God, I don't want them to do it without me. But there's also a piece of, let me get my ass in the room to be sure that they don't fuck this up. Excuse me, this is the pastor that cusses. I'm sorry. Let me throw that disclaimer out there. Let me get in the room so they don't tear this all the way up. Because of those other individuals that may fit into those other two categories that you described. Yeah. They'll show up in a room and come up with some solution that when it's all said and done, you're like, who was at the table with them?
And and it's scary. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've been here, and this is this space that we're going to talk about next. This is a space where things like tokenism thrives. This is the space where they weaponize us against each other because they convince us that we're the ones with the answers, and we don't want anyone at the table. This is the space where white supremacy inside of agencies really stand up, because you'll have an ED that is a white cisgender person that's been at the front of the agency for 20 years, and the only way they know how to talk about diversity is to hire a bunch of Black people that still have to report to a white person. When one of the biggest ways and one of the swiftest ways you can engage in some equity and inclusion in your organization is for you to step the fuck down. Because after 20 years, beloved, if you either can't get a consulting coin or you can go into another agency and do something, then we need to talk about what you was doing for that 20 years, niece, huh? So are you ready to be unnecessary? Is your work centered around eradicating the issue? Again, you're like, oh my God, Dominique, we work around hunger. Yeah, it seems big, but I'm saying, are you working in a manner to where you don't want to be necessary to the process? I'm not saying completely the issue may dissipate. I'm saying whatever piece of the issue you're holding, are you building, implementing, partnering with folks to do work that takes you off the board? And then if the issue is too big, or you're at least doing that on an individual level with your clients or in your life. So I also want to acknowledge that you can work in agencies. You can be like, look, I got to give me a coin. I got to make it. I done went to school. I got all this student debt, so on and so forth. And maybe the rules and the regulations your agency makes it difficult for you to approach it as such. Then what are you doing in your personal space? Because what I know to be true is that most folks who work in advocacy during the day, it doesn't stop when they clock out. So what board are you sitting on? What volunteering are you doing? Goodness, how are you voting if that's what you choose to do with your power to dismantle these systems? Tommy and Daryl, thoughts on these prompts here?
So my mind immediately goes to precisely what you said. So our church, our ministry, we have a homeless feeding program where twice a month we go and we provide meals to the homeless. Interestingly, we go and provide meals to the homeless at a homeless shelter outside of the shelter because the meals that they're receiving on the inside of the shelter are less than what they need and are not quality meals by the assessment of the folks that are there, right? Folks are eating those meals in there and they're still coming outside to get more because they don't know where the next one's coming from. Or there have been instances where we have donated food to these agencies and the food that we brought in, I'm talking about turkey and dressing and the yams and the works that we brought in, we're told at the door by individuals that are there, oh, we'll never see that food because the folks that volunteer in the kitchen will eat that first before we'll ever see it. And so we have this program set up where twice a month, minimal, it's a minimal sacrifice, but it's what we, as far as our sustainability, have the ability to do at this point in time. So we do it, we go and we do this feeding consistently, and we've done over 4,000 meals to date. But on the flip side of that, like you said, while we can't completely eradicate hunger or eradicate the crisis of homelessness, we could partner with folks that could help us in that work. That's one major piece. But the B portion of that is exactly what you said. Do we at least engage in that dismantling on a personal and individual level? And I think back, and this is not for some pat on my back, this is just to show the impact of the work when you live the work, right? I'm reminded of a young lady that came to me. I was working a little part-time job out at the mall, and a lady came into my store sharing her story of escaping a domestic violence situation in a whole nother city and state. She had come here to escape the circumstance, had nothing but the clothes on her back, and had her little 8 or 9-year-old daughter with her at the time, and said that the assistance that she was receiving from one of the agencies here in Omaha, that assistance was going to run out in 24 hours, and she didn't know where her and her daughter were going to go. Well, I don't know if it was the pastor in me, I don't know if it was the Christian in me, or I don't know if it was just the human in me, right? That said, you and your baby are not about to be out on the streets. And so I had the space in my house. I didn't know the woman. I didn't know. And I'm not advising that this is the work that everybody should do, right? But I took her and her daughter in. They stayed with me for 6 months. In 6 months, she got access to her own housing. She now lives in her own place. She has her own job. She's a member of the church. She serves in ministry. Her daughter is thriving. They're doing amazing. And it's just a testament to the idea that, like you said, this advocacy work, this work that we do, when you really are in it, it's a lifestyle. And while there may not be things that you can do by yourself on a systemic level, you can one by one. Look, I'm like Oprah on Brewster's Place, baby. We'll tear this wall down one brick at a time, brick by brick. And so we, however you got to do it, even if you've got to do it on a smaller scale, just knowing that you've made impact. And it doesn't always look like news coverage. It doesn't always look like all of the applause and all of that. It doesn't look like all of that. Just knowing that you've done the work to accomplish what has been laid on your heart to accomplish, to help somebody overcome these systems that have been in place that are keeping a foot on their neck, right?
Absolutely. So from my perspective, like, absolutely, like, is my work, do I want my work to be centered around eradicating the issue? Absolutely. One of the biggest issues that I seen when I started, even before I started working at Nebraska AIDS Project, because that's very, very recent, talking like 3 years recent, where I've had the ability to actually collect a paycheck, was just the lack of people of color, or Black people specifically, that were in positions to help other Black people. And so when I came in, and my job was strictly to be prevention and outreach. And so my first question was, well, what are you doing for these clients who are Black, who are experiencing new diagnoses, who have harm around white people, who don't want to seek help because it's white people that are in these positions, basically creating additional barriers for them outside of, what they're already experiencing living with HIV. So one of the things that I started to develop was a linkage to care program. I wanted to create a linkage to care program where I would just serve Black clients, Black gay men specifically. And my job would basically be to walk them through the process, step by step by step by step. And, not to pat myself on the back, but, I use myself as a model, because I do understand the level of privilege that I have. I was fortunate enough to have a family who was embracive of me when I came out as gay. I had a family who was embracive of me once I disclosed my HIV status. Not everybody else has that, and that was instrumental in getting me to the position where I'm at today. So I wanted to create that space. I wanted to be that support system for individuals who don't have that, who have been kicked out of homes and been through multiple layers of trauma and harm. Those are the things that I've single-handedly, I hate saying that, but yes, I'm doing the work as the only Black person employed at my agency, single-handedly dealing with clients in my demographic, trying to uplift them and figure out, take away those barriers and get them to a position where they can realize that you can thrive and be a person who's living with HIV.
Don't worry, I'll celebrate you. You don't have to do it. I'll do it for you. Because when I received, don't you worry about it. When I received my HIV diagnosis, it was funny. When Tommy received his, he came to me to share his status with me, and I tried to hold it together the whole time he was there. When he left, I lost it. I hit the floor crying. But as soon as I received mine, ironically, 3 years after he received his, he was the first person I called. And I share that to say that really the conversation that he's having about the linkage to care and the impact of having the most impacted at the front of the work, the impact of that. literally saved my life. Because if I didn't have someone like Tommy that I could readily call on, that I knew that I had access to, I don't know who I would have reached out to. I don't know what that support would have looked like. And that's not to say that my family has not or would not have supported me at that moment, but in the way that I needed the support at that moment, it couldn't come from anybody else other than someone that had walked it, that had lived it, that had done it, that could help me navigate the steps. And it's the reason that I do, off the record, the work that I do. With helping folks get the Ryan White applications in on time, dropping folks off at appointments, and doing all of these things. There ain't none of that in my job description, and nobody's Charles Dren, ain't nobody give me a coin for it, baby. However, it is just the lifestyle that you live when this is the work that you are passionate about doing.
But I also think we need to, but that's the only way we're going to survive. The way the systems are set up, if we don't go out of our way, even in our own efforts to try to stabilize and get access to get it for other folks, our people aren't going to have it. And that's the issue, is that in a city, Omaha as a community, we are a thriving nonprofit community. We are a thriving philanthropy community, right? Like it's our city is like a city like nothing else that I've seen when it comes to the way that we have programs and funds and things that are meant to really show up for people. But we still are seeing people have to work outside of the systems that have been positioned to help them and support them in accessing liberation, to work with each other. Well, child, I got $5, you got $5, well then let's make it 10. And that's when I think about how we're trying to implement and develop the work at Black and Pink. I couldn't imagine having a staff member work for me and they got to go get a payday loan. I just can't see it. I can't see having a staff member that's working around poverty and they got to go get a pantry. I cannot imagine. My job as an executive director is to be the steward of this agency and make sure that my people's needs are met. They feel safe, they feel affirmed, and they feel like by being here in this agency, they are taking steps to their greater selves. And I am excited to know that that Black and Pink is not their last step. I am excited to help them figure out what the next step is and how I can support them in getting there, because it's bigger than like a mission or vision statement of any one organization. And to any managers, any directors who are watching this, you all have to stop only pouring into people or doing professional development that is going to push forward your grant, or only wanting to pour into people that you think are going to be there for longer than a year. You can't be stingy without how you pour into people. And I said this on the Seekers panel the other day, stop going after and seeking people you're not ready for. Stop. Because you are telling them that this is a space for them to come into as their whole selves. You are telling them that y'all put the policies in place and this, that, and the third, and then they're gooped. And they get in there because what y'all don't know what happened between y'all promising what y'all was gonna let us do in the interview and between you really showing us your true colors. We done promised all of our people, baby, I'm in here. We about to make some things happen. And so our people be like, okay, child, something about to shift. And then they be sitting there like, child, ain't nothing changed. You sitting there like, oh, this ain't no different than anything else. And the person above all of that is thinking that they did enough because the person is in the agency. Being present isn't enough. Voice and access to how voices can be wielded is something very powerful. And when we are talking about system impacted people, historically, we've had the experiences of our voices being minimized or us being told that our voices are too loud. And if we want to make it, if we want to get along, we need to shrink. All these other things that by the time we get in front of you, you're like, well, this person didn't say anything. They may not even understand that they have the right to say something. And I tell this story often. I was I was in I had such a desire to be in the work and like be paid for it. I've been volunteering, running Pride here in Nebraska, all these things, honey. I'm taking off paid work to go volunteer, sit on the panel, all the things. And I made a Facebook post and I was like, I just want to serve coffee in the agency. I will file things. I will count paper clips. Just let me push around the cart. And I was so afraid that I wasn't going to get work that I had kind of given up. And Ann Smolsky, who is over Extension Services at Charles Drew now, Ann was a person who, when I was about to get my electricity cut off, she did the paperwork so I could get my bill paid. And that was 11 years ago. And we've kind of, again, known each other and was in the work together. And then when she was positioned at Charles Drew, she started at Charles Drew in April, and I was her first hire on her team. And I remember the day she took me to lunch. I also remember because she took me to a place that serves salads. I've forgiven her for that since. But she was like, there's this job that's happening. It's going to be dope. And I was like, yeah, girl, I've heard this a million times. I'm going to apply. But once it gets to HR or such and such and such, I'm not going to be able to get it. But it's cute. Thanks for telling me about it. And thanks for lunch, girl. She hits me up. She's like, okay, do you want the job? I'm like, yes. I send in the stuff and I don't want to let myself get excited. I don't want to let myself want it. I go in for the interview. And it'll be July 1st it was July 1st of 2016 was the day I started at Charles Drew. And I went into the interview, it was just Ann and the director of HR, and it was the shortest interview ever. I left out of there. First of all, my clothes are too big. I don't have any dress clothes. It's just all the things are wrong. I leave and maybe 10 minutes later I get a call and it's the director of HR offering me a position. And I was like, I'll take it. And I had hung up the phone. And trying to call Nikki because I'm in tears and crying. I'm trying to change clothes in the car because I still got to go to my server job. And HR calls me back and she's like, you don't want to know what we gonna pay you? And I'm like, you know what? I should have asked that. And I look back on that and how hungry I was for opportunity and how many people had brought me in spaces saying they wanted my voice. What was it? They want our rhythms, but they want our rhythm, but they don't want our blues. And it was like, you didn't have me on the committee. You'll have me on the popular opinion poll group and all those other things. But how do I see my voice, my efforts affecting the issue that is affecting my lived experience and the lived experience of those who look like me and those I love? So when we think about voice, who is being heard and who's listening? Are you uplifting the voice of the most impacted? And uplift oftentimes means that you get out of the way. And are those voices being tokenized? Are you positioning the most impacted? They may be in the room. They may be in a position. You may have made them the executive director. No shade. But the way they hold that power as an ED, baby, they're one of the girls. It's given very much puppeteer tease, right? And then you feel like you've done your thing because like, oh, it's being led by a Black person. So anything they do, such and such, well, you don't want to affirm that you've built a whole system based on your whiteness, so that's always going to affect them. They may be Black, but probably 95% of their board is white. All their funders have, all these things that can affect how you move. How are we tokenizing folks of color, Black folks, in the work that then alienates them from their communities? And then once y'all are done with them, y'all throw them to the side and they want to come back to us and they want us to be there. And there's been a lot of harm. So Daryl and Tommy, I feel like y'all can really go in on this section. So I'm gonna just sit back and drink my Sprite. Sprite, if you out here, we'll take any sort of sponsorship. Amen, amen. But on these prompts, what are y'all thinking? What have y'all seen? And what do you think about it?
So again, I'm gonna lean into my own personal experience because that's what I know. Absolutely. Did I reach a point where I felt like my voice was being tokenized? Absolutely. Because it's a powerful thing to be the first person to try to want to do something, especially when it comes to HIV in the state of Nebraska. But to be the Black person who's trying to navigate that is a whole different ball game. And to be honest, like, and I don't think my boss is on this webinar, but it's fine. We've had conversations about it. I reached a point to where, you know, I just didn't think the work was going to happen for me. I did not see, you know, Tommy working at Nebraska AIDS Project. I didn't, you know, it got to a point where I was tired. I was tired of being asked to come to tables and all y'all was offering me was a cold sandwich and a $50 gift card. That became too much. Like it was for me to have to tap in to and essentially re-traumatize myself just detailing, you know, my story of my diagnosis. It became too much. And I did not see any, like I said, I didn't see that, I didn't feel like like I felt like my story was appreciated, but also I didn't feel like I was being uplifted in a way that was going to put me in a position to succeed. So like low key, like I think it was like in 2015, 2016, I slowly started removing all mentions of like me living with HIV from my social medias. Like anything that I had put out there, any status, like I slowly but surely started to delete them because I was just like, you've been doing this for 6 years and you have not been, you know, the fruits have not happened. And while I would always hold like a place in my heart for the work, this ain't me. I'm just gonna settle into this 40 hour a week corporate job. They paying me a cute little coin, and it's gonna be what it's gonna be. I'm gonna be here for the rest of my life. And it wasn't until like, you know, I got the position, I got the phone call. Never mind, I wasn't the first person that they thought of, but that's neither here or there. Dominique, me and you have had that conversation. But, you know, when I finally got to that position where I felt like where I was, you know, where I actually had the employment, had the job, and they paid me a little bit more money than what I was making at my corporate job because they knew I wasn't going to leave that job without and take a pay cut, first of all. The work doesn't mean that much to me where I'm going to jeopardize my living situation, being honest. But it wasn't until that point where I felt like my voice was being uplifted. And since then, like they've come through, you know, and, you know, I've had to do some extreme labor and I've had to, you know, work hard to shake shit up and make changes for the agency. But I feel so grateful, honestly. I feel grateful that now that I've had the opportunity to come in and infiltrate and make the due change that I need. Now I feel like I'm at a point where I can start uplifting other people who are walking behind me. And it, you know, really kind of goes back to, you know, is your work centered on eradicating the issue, or what are you doing to, you know, work your way out of a job? I absolutely want to work my way out of a job. I don't want to, like, I'll always be tied to HIV work, but does that mean I'm holding a place at Nebraska AIDS Project forever? Absolutely not. If there's another person who can come in behind me and do things 10 times better than me, then I welcome it. I welcome the next black boy, even black girl to come in, black trans person come in behind me and do the work. Because I've never been about taking up space. I want to carve out a space and then leave it for somebody else to take over, and then just do the damn thing.
I just want to say quickly, because Tommy kind of glossed over it, but I think it's really important to discuss. There are going to be times that things are brought to you and you need to realize it's not for you, and don't just sit it down. Make sure that the right person is able for it to be handed to them. And you hear what I said, not that they can pick it up, but make sure that it's being handed to them, because this job at the position of executive director, I took this job, I didn't just take it for myself. I didn't. It was so many other things. I was like, okay, what does this mean? And they came to me for that job that Tommy has. And I was like, why would you ever talk to me and not have gone straight to Tommy? But nonetheless, we here, let me tell you what you really need to do. Huh? I said, I'm because you done took me to lunch. I'm gonna eat your food now. And your company is nice, but let me tell you as soon as I leave what you should be doing. In the same sense, when my position at Charles Drew, it wasn't so much tokenizing, it was I was afraid of not being a part of the process. And I was working as the ED of Black and Pink and working as an adolescent health educator for 11 months of 2018. I was working 2 full-time jobs. And I remember it was a moment when I was like, I really loved this job at Charles Drew, and I still love Charles Drew, but I'm like, this position isn't the position for me anymore. I'm in it, I can do it in my sleep, but is this really, am I pouring into it, and is it pouring into me? And I'm like, no. And so I remember when I talked to Ann, I'm like, this is my list. And really my list were just Tommy and Daryl. And even when HR called me, I told them that, they were like, well, they wanted me to talk about both of them on the same call about their strengths. And I was like, well, I'm gonna just tell you that you need both of them because their strengths offset each other. And if you really want a strong program, you might want to find the coins. And by the grace, things happened. And regardless, one got the job they wanted and one got some extra coin to stay in the job they was in. Amen. And there takes intentionality, and you have to believe that your opportunity is going to be your opportunity, because that fear-based, that scarcity mentality, when it comes to opportunity, when it comes to dollars, when it comes to the speaking engagement, I promise you, if you buy into that, you will not prosper. For every time that I've really been intentional about, like, Dominique, that's not for you, it ain't even been that God has brought something that's for me. For folks who like this is just how my process. God brought something that was bigger than what I would even try to reach to. When I've done the internal work to say, Dominique, like, this is dope, it'll be cool, but who else? How do you get out of the way? I did not just get something that's like ready for me. I got something that it was so big, I had to aspire to step up to it. And that's that reciprocity of the universe. That's that community piece, and that's that shared liberation. Daryl, will you please take us home with just like your experience in this, and how can people listen? Like, as a pastor, your one of your biggest jobs is listening to people. Can you share like techniques you use or your approach to really sitting down and seeing people in the midst of trying to then serve them and engage in empathy and solidarity with them?
So just a little bit of history real quickly. I grew up in a large church. I grew up in a very large church that ran very much so, very business oriented, like many larger churches do. One of the things that I've discovered over the time of pastoring is that the size of the church definitely impacts the way that you have to conduct the leadership of the church. And so that business model for that size of church that worked and works currently for them. But what I had to discover when we founded our ministry 11 years ago is that we're not that size of ministry, and I can't run ministry in that way. But I was literally trying to run ministry in a way that, hey, here's the leader. Hey, here's the plan. Hey, everybody hop on board. And over the course of bumping my head enough times, I finally discovered that I needed an entire paradigm shift. And that was this, that leaders do not make followers. Leaders develop new leaders. That's it. That's the model. And the idea is that I bring you into space so that I can develop you enough so that in the event that I'm sick, that I'm dead, that I'm gone, that that this is no longer my space to be in anymore, that the infrastructure has been set up in a way that the development has been done enough with you, that enough has been poured into you, that this thing runs like a well-oiled machine, even in my absence. And so understanding that I didn't start a church with the idea of it dying off if I were to die off, or if I were to move cities, or what the work is what is the reason for the ministry. It is the work. And if that is the case, the work is bigger than me. Darrell Brown can't change everything. Darrell Brown can't fix everything. He can't. And none of us in these positions of executive directors or whatever leadership role we're in, we can't do it all by ourselves. And so it is imperative that we do the work to find out who is the next leader that I can pour into, so that they can be their best selves in whatever role that they bring to the table, so that this thing can continue on.
Thank you. This isn't easy work. If it was easy work, everybody would do it, huh? But it's essential work. And it's the work that has to happen, I really believe, for us to have an opportunity for a shared experience of liberation. And one last thing is that one of the things that I really focus on is if I get somebody in the room, I want to make sure that they have access to the room without me being involved in it. And Darrell Northam can tell you, like, I'll introduce them to somebody and I'll walk away. Y'all got it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to own or gatekeep their access to other people, because then it's like, oh, I did that for you. Oh, you know what I'm saying? I've had people who have like connected me to someone and I've emailed or messaged a person outside of them, and it's like they felt like they've been slighted. And it's like, okay, sis, I thought you connected me so I could, so I could make something, shake, rattle, and roll. But no, you connected me so you can say you connected me, or you brought me in the space, you can say you brought me in the space. I'm never, what I know to be true is that if I go, we all going. And for right now, my all is about 8 of us that I can fit. You know what I'm saying? Hoping that I'm doing the work through Black and Pink, that it becomes a larger vessel for people to go. But there was a moment when I was like, I'm on these planes every day, and my family isn't with me. And then it got to the point where I wasn't getting on the plane, and Tommy and Darrell and Andrew weren't by my side. And the other ones would be there too if they, wasn't being parents and responsible peoples and whatnot. So just make sure that you are really looking to your left and your right. Because so often we're trying to get over, I get it, like, I'm trying to make it. I'm trying to make it. I've had all this happen to me. So valid. And that I mentality is really straightforward vision. Use your peripheral if you feel like I'm not the place where I can turn right or left, then at least try to use your peripheral, because when you see the folks who are next to you, you can make sure that they're not only next to you, but they're in step with you as you move forward. And also then be prepared to see them maybe move a little quicker than you do and still stay in step. Don't fall out of line. Because again, I think it's possible. I have to believe it's possible that we all can get to a space where we have access to the things that we deserve at our own will without the permission from other people. So thank you all for joining us today. If you want to reach us and you have a budget, you can email us at these here. You get one Let Me Bend Your Ear email to me. And I'll tell you a secret. I usually am faster to respond to those when they've been like, you know what, I love Black and Pink and I've donated to Black and Pink. What do you need? Don't email me asking me to do your dissertation and all that foolishness. Spam folder. But if you hit us up, I think this is it's a great opportunity for us to continue this conversation. So these are our emails, and you can. We all are really Googleable at this point to find our social media and other things, just so we can stay in touch. Thank you to Nikki and Dusty. Nikki Zaborowski is our executive assistant at Black and Pink National and keeps all of our stuffs together. I think we talked today about, David and I talked about like adding under quotes like the people person under your title to keep us all together. And Dusty Ginner, who is our director of communications and grants here at Black and Pink National, for holding us down. Thank you to all the, all the Facebook commenters and the Facebook participants. Thank you to the folks that are in here. Do we have any questions that people have posed? I see thank yous, I see amens, I see questions about cash apps. There we go. So if we don't have any questions, we just see thank yous. Awesome. We will see y'all next time. Black and Pink will be rolling out in the next couple of weeks a calendar of our offerings. So you don't have to feel like, oh my goodness, I just found out about this on Tuesday and it's Thursday. So you can engage with us, because at this time, there's no reason why we shouldn't be making it to where everyone has access to this information. And one of our accountability measures as an agency is to make sure that we are thought leaders in this work, but we're engaging in thought partnership as well. So please look for that calendar and look for ways to sign up. Tommy and Daryl, any last thoughts, any last comments, anything for the people?
Thank you all for being on the call.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that you being on the call shows that your interest in the work and your dedication to the work, and we appreciate you.
Absolutely. I echo that. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for listening to me talk. Listening to us talk, excuse me. Thank you.
Awesome. We'll see y'all next time. Have a great Stonewall. What is that? What we at 28th is Sunday? Child, throw a brick. Whether it's physical, whether it's your work, whether you shaking a little ass on your love, throw a brick. And have a great weekend.